Ted Bundy, Ed Kemper, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, Charles Manson. What do all these people have in common? Well, they were all interviewed by the legendary FBI agent Robert Ressler. He was one of the pioneers of criminal profiling at the FBI, and he also coined the term serial killer. So, welcome back to the War Room Library. If you've been following along, welcome back. And if you haven't, well, welcome for the first time. So today I'm going to be reviewing the book Whoever Fights the Monsters by Robert Ressler. So, as I said before, Robert Ressler was one of the pioneers of criminal profiling at the FBI. I first came across this book, I would say, in the early 90s. It was at a place called Overport City. It was quite a strange shop itself. It was selling books by weight and not by price. So I don't know what had happened. They must have fallen off a truck or off a ship, and they had all these books to get rid of. So I got this very cheaply. And I mean, when I first saw this book, I thought, oh, this is something interesting. I'd never heard of criminal profiling before. I'd heard of Silence of the Lambs, which it mentions on the front here. And I thought, oh, I wonder if he had anything to do with that. And absolutely he did. Whoever Fights the Monsters is Robert Ressler's book on, in his career. He started off as a criminal investigation department. Well, he was in the CRD in the army. And then from there, he progressed on to the FBI at later stages. He was doing like hostage negotiation, and then went on to start the whole behavioural science unit. And then later on, there was another guy called John Douglas, who's also a very big name in the criminal profiling world. I will do his book next week called The Mindhunter, I think it's called. Yeah, so that is. So this I cannot recommend this book enough. It is absolutely fantastic. At the time, it's very easy to read, but it can be a little bit gruesome. But I really enjoyed reading this book. It was I just felt like I learned quite a lot about something I had no idea about. And straight after this, I wanted to read as much about it as I could. So, for example, with Robert Ressler, he looked at different things. He looked at sort of the crime scene. He looked at what the killer's behavior was like. And then he looked at were there anything familiar or any similarities in different murders in which we could relate to specific people. So the main part of the criminal profiling, they called, I think it's sub and unsubs, he mentions. So a sub is the subject. So if you know who the killer is, then that would be the sub, and if it's the unsub, there's an unknown subject. So you don't know who the person is, and with that, I think that's when the criminal profiling came about. So there's a whole story and a whole thing about how it all started and things like that. But I think for Robert Ressler, he had a specific thing in mind. For him, the whole purpose of doing the criminal profiling was being able to, he said, if you can study the crime scene, you should be able to start to understand who the person is who's committing these murders, if there are serial killers or not. So one of the first things when you come across a victim at a crime scene, you sort of study how the victim was approached. You look at, was there any planning in this event, in this murder? Was the victim controlled at all, or how were they controlled? What type of weapon was used? And also, was the body moved or staged? And by looking at this, you can then sort of understand or come up with sort of evidence to know that this person is either an organized or disorganized killer. So with that, you would have the sort of evidence of the crime scene. With that, you then need to look at the behavior, and this is where Robert Ressler and his team really got into going and getting into the mind of the killer. So it was a matter of going and visiting all the most, I think, notorious serial killers. So the names I mentioned earlier, sort of Ed Kemper, Jeffrey Dahmer, and the likes. Basically, just went and had a chat with them, interviewed them, basically found out how they would come across their victims and certain things that would do. I mean, I think for the criminal profilers, this is the hardest part of the job. I think from day in, day out, if you really getting inside the mind of the killer or the mind of the monster, should we say, it can be a very dark place. And if you're there a lot of the time, it can take a lot out of you. And I think in a number of cases where it has had a detrimental effect. John Douglas, I think he had like a meltdown or something. It was just horrific. And even Mickey Pistorius, I think her name is. Mickey Pistorius is the sort of South African mindhunter. I can remember just really finished reading this book. I was in South Africa at the time. I'd finished the book. I thought, oh, this is really good. I'm really interested in this now. And I just happened to be watching the news, and they had Mickey Pistorius on the news getting really excited because Robert Ressler was arriving from Quantico, from the FBI to South Africa to help train her and help her catch serial killers in South Africa. So it was really fascinating for me after that. After the behavior, they look for sort of similar characteristics which they can say that is part of the killer. So the similar characteristics could be ligature things or things like that. So don't forget to subscribe. I'm John Mason, and you've been watching the War Room Library.